Hi PST, you're here with Allan. Yeah, we were having technical issues at the beginning, so if you were watching you couldn't hear any sound. I hope you can hear the sound now. But yeah, I guess I have to restart because nobody really heard what I was saying. So I'm going to go just a little bit faster. But anyhow, guys, our topic for this week, if you guys take a look at the title of this week's materials, it says if poems, right? And we're going to talk about your assignment later today. But as you can probably guess, our major focus for this week is using if in if clauses or in conditionals, right? So like I was saying before though, we have a couple of different conditionals, don't we? Now, a lot of people say that we have three conditionals in the English language, right? The first conditional, the second conditional, and the third conditional. Now, this is true. We do have three conditionals, but we also have an additional conditional. We also have the zero conditional. So actually, we have four conditionals in total. The zero conditional, the first conditional, the second conditional, and a third conditional. And that is what we're going to talk about in our first class here. Now, seeing as we had some technical issues, our first class might go into the second class, and our second class might go into the third class. We'll see how we do, right? But like I said, we have the zero conditional, that looks really messy, I don't know why. We have the first conditional, and we have the second and the third conditional, right? Now, it's important to understand how to use all these conditionals. And I would be lying if I said that they're all equally commonly used. That's not exactly true. I think the most commonly used conditional is the first conditional followed by the second conditional. After that, the third conditional and especially the zero conditional are not as frequently used as the other ones, but we have to go over them anyhow. So what I would like you guys to do is to take a look at this sheet here, right? And we're starting with the zero conditional first. So let's look at this together. The good thing for me is I won't have to write so many examples on the board, but anyhow. So we've got our structure, our usage, and our examples. Now, the structure for the zero conditional is very, very simple, right? It says if plus present simple, ... present simple. Okay. More important than that is when do we use this, right? What is the usage? So take a look at the usage. It says to talk about things that are always true, like a scientific fact, right? Now, this makes the zero conditional kind of useful, but also not so commonly used, because when you're using the zero conditional, you're not really talking about some situation where you would do something, right? You're talking about some kind of fact, something that is generally true, or you're talking about science, right? And I'm guessing that a lot of us, unless we are scientists, don't usually talk about scientific facts so often. But let's take a look at our examples here. First one here is, if you freeze water, it turns into ice. Okay, so the structure of this is very, very simple. If you, now of course this you doesn't mean you. This means you in general, people, right? If you freeze water, it turns into ice. This is a scientific fact. We know that if we put water in a cup and we put it in our freezer and we leave it for a couple of hours, it will turn into ice because we will have frozen that water, right? Okay, so nice and simple. But continuing onwards here, it says, and if you heat water at 100 degrees, it boils. So on the other hand, we know that if we heat water, especially at 100 degrees, which is very, 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 very high temperature, it boils. Again, This is a fact, a scientific fact. We know that this will happen, right? And that's why we're using the zero conditional. Next one here. If students miss an exam, the professor fails them. Okay. Now, this is not a scientific fact, right? We don't know who this professor is. We don't know who these students are. But we do know that if the students miss an exam, the professor will fail them. This is generally true. This generally happens in a, the sound is not working again. Can anybody hear me? But I'm going to keep going. Maybe some people can hear me. So anyhow, guys, usually in Canadian universities, if students miss an exam, the professor fails them, right? There's no chance that they can make up for it. So this is generally true. It's not a scientific fact, but this is usually true. Okay, next one here we have, if my wife has a cold, I usually catch it, right? Now, I know for a fact that this is true because if my wife does have a cold, I will also usually catch it. Now, what I just did there when I was speaking is I was actually using the first conditional. But anyhow, this is generally true. Next one we have, if I get tired if I work too much. Now, this one, they kind of switched the clauses around, right? We could also say, if I work too much, I get tired. I get tired if I work too much. So keep in mind that you can switch the clauses around. You've got your if clause, and then you have your conditional clause. So that's another important thing that I should have written down here. With all of these conditionals, with the structure, now of course the structure is already pointed out on the information sheet, but generally you're just going to have something we call if clause, ... and then conditional clause. Now, this will always be the same, regardless of whether you're using the zero conditional, the first conditional, second conditional, or third conditional. But also remember that it doesn't always have to be the if clause first, conditional clause next. You can switch these around, and that is okay. Okay, guys, but just wanted to point that out. Getting back to the zero conditional here, we have, if I'm late for dinner, they start eating without me. Wow, really sad, right? But this is, again, a general truth for this person. So, like I said before, the zero conditional is not that complicated. You're using the present simple and the present simple, again, in both clauses. If something happens, right? If cats don't eat food, cats die. Wow, that's really sad. Why did I say that? Okay, but that is generally true. That is a scientific truth. All right, guys, so that is the zero conditional. Like I said before, it's not so commonly used. It really depends on you. Again, if you're maybe a scientist or, I don't know, you work for, I don't know, some kind of programming company or something, maybe you do use the zero conditional quite often, but in general, the zero conditional is maybe the least commonly used conditional. So let's move on to the most commonly used conditional, the first conditional, right? This is the most commonly used one, and also not that hard to use. So our structure for the first conditional is if plus simple present, and then simple future. Now, what it means for the simple future here is, of course, your subject plus will or won't plus a verb, but in the base form of the verb, right? So is this a little bit harder than the zero conditional? Yes, but much more commonly used, much more useful, right? Now, when do we use the first conditional? The first conditional is used to talk about possibilities in the present or in the future. So that is why the first conditional is maybe by far the most important conditional and by far the most commonly used conditional. Is because we're always, when we use this, we're talking about the possibility right now or the possibility of something occurring in the future, right? So let's look at some of our examples here. If it rains, I will stay at home. I will stay at home. So if it rains, I will stay at home. Now again, if clause, if it rains, I will stay at home, conditional clause, right? Very easy. If I wake up late, I will miss the bus. Good, right? If I wake up late, I will miss the bus. Okay, good. And if it is sunny, we'll go to the park, right? So again, if clause and then conditional. If one, I believe this is one, J-U-A-N. I believe this is a Latin name, so I think it's pronounced one. I could be wrong, sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. But if one leaves, Paula will be sad, right? So if one leaves, if clause, Paula will be sad, conditional clause. If I find your email, I will send you the picture. If I find your email, I will send you the picture. So again, if I find your email, if clause, I will send you the picture, conditional clause. Now, remember, we can switch it around, right? We could start with the conditional clause here first. I will send you the picture if I find your email, right? So remember, you can always change these around, right? You don't have to keep the same structure. It doesn't always have to start with the if clause first. Anyhow, last one here. If you study hard, you will pass your exams. Wow, thanks for the encouragement, right? So if you study hard, you will pass your exams. Awesome. Okay, everybody. So like I said before, first conditional is the most commonly used one, right? And you could easily think of some examples that you could come up with probably right now, right? If I don't eat lunch, I will be hungry. If I don't work hard, I will be poor. If I don't study French, I will not be able to speak French, right? So this one, you could think of examples right off the top of your head very, very simply, right? Just think about possibilities in the future for yourself or for others, right? If, let me think. Maybe it's something in relation to the coronavirus. If everybody goes back to work, many people will get the coronavirus, right? Oh no, that sounds so negative, but I think that's true. If I don't go back to work, I will have a hard time making money. If the economy continues to get worse, people will suffer, right? So this can be used, talk about yourself, talk about other people and possibilities in the future. The first conditional, if you don't know how to use it already right now, please make sure you study it because it's vitally important. Just like the second conditional. The second conditional is also quite important. Maybe not as useful as the first conditional, but still quite commonly used and really, really good. So let's move on, guys, to our second conditional. Okay. Now, the structure of the second conditional is a little bit harder than the first conditional or the second conditional because it says here, if plus past simple, and if you're using was, it should be were instead, then also present conditional. Okay, so with the present conditional, you're going to have like a lot of would or wouldn't plus a verb, but the verb, again, is going to be in the base form. Now, the most common way we use the second conditional is to talk about imaginary situations in the present or in the future, right? Now, this is why the second conditional is really, really useful, but also maybe not as commonly used as the first conditional, because a lot of time when we're talking with people, maybe our friends or loved ones, we will often talk about imaginary situations, right? Or we might talk about completely crazy situations. And in these cases, we will use the second conditional. So let's take a look at some examples. I think the first example here is something that everybody has talked about before. If I won $1 million, I would buy a car. So again, you got would, base form of the verb, and then something following, right? So we got our if clause, and then we have our conditional clause. If I won $1 million, if clause, I would buy a new car. Now again, this is something that is maybe not going to happen. Probably it's really not going to happen. It's an imaginary situation. So that's what you have to keep in mind. When you're using this, it's probably something that has a very low chance of actually occurring. It is an imaginary situation. it will probably not happen. But if I won $1 million, I would buy a car. That's a great answer, right? Now, for me, for example, living in Vancouver, if I won $1 million, I would put it in the bank because $1 million is not enough money to buy a car. I think they should update this and maybe change it to $10 million. Or sorry, not a car, a house. Geez, of course I could buy a nice car if I had $1 million, but not a house in Vancouver. Houses in Vancouver, ooh, I think the average price is 1.2 million, 1.3. I could be wrong. Maybe it's going down a little bit because of the coronavirus disaster. Not too sure. Anyhow, the next example, this is something that is good for me actually, and this is a very commonly used way to use the second conditional. If I were you, I would quit smoking. If I were you, I would quit smoking. Now, actually, I want to look at this example in a little bit more detail because this is a very common way to use the second conditional. Actually, I won't erase this. But, sorry guys, I know this is looking kind of confusing. If I were you, if I were him, if I were her, if I were them, etc., comma, I would I would do something. Now let's think about this here. If I were you, if I were him, if I were her, if I were them, if I were Paul, if I were John, if I were an American soldier, if I were a Sri Lankan dentist, I would This structure here with our if clause and then with our conditional clause, this is often used to do what? When do we use this structure? We use this structure to give advice or make a suggestion. So this is, of course, the second conditional. This is an if clause. And also, remember, the second conditional is usually used in an imaginary situation when something is very unlikely going to happen. But we use this one specifically to give somebody advice or maybe make a suggestion to someone. So this is a very, very common way to use the second conditional because we all have friends, we all have loved ones, or people we know and care about. And sometimes when we want to give them advice from our point of view, we will give them advice like this. We will use the second conditional. We will say, if I were you, I would, and then your suggestion, right? So your good friend John is a smoker, right? John's been smoking for a long, long time, right? John's 35 now, and he's always coughing, and he always looks sick. And you think it's because of his smoking. So you say to John, hey, John, if I were you, I would quit smoking, right? Or maybe you have a good friend, Stephanie, right? And recently, Stephanie has put on a lot of weight, right? She's, you know, she used to be around an average weight of, what is an average weight for a woman? Well, I don't know. She used to be 45 kilograms. That's maybe too light. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, okay, so Stephanie used to be 45 kilograms, but in the past year, you've noticed that Stephanie has put on a lot of weight. And when you're talking to Stephanie, she says, OMG, oh my God, I am 85 kilograms. And you're like, oh dear, that's really heavy, right? So maybe you say to Stephanie, hey, listen, Stephanie, if I were you, I would go on a diet, right? I would go on a diet, or I would start exercising, or I would change what I eat, or I would go to the gym. You know, you want to give them advice. Now, culturally speaking, this is not something that happens in Canada so much. Canadian people are always really reluctant to make remarks about somebody's weight. Usually in Canada, if somebody's gaining a lot of weight, we try to give them advice, or we try to give them suggestions, but in an indirect way. But anyhow, this very, very commonly used. This is a really great thing or structure if you want to give advice or make some suggestions. Anyhow, but let's move on. Sorry, we should look at the other examples here. Next one is really great. If I were the president, I would lower taxes. Oh, please, God, lower the taxes. Taxes are too high in Canada, right? But of course, in Canada, we don't have a president. We have a prime minister. So it would be better here if we said, if I were the prime minister, I would lower taxes. Anyhow, so this is an imaginary situation. This is probably never going to happen, right? This person is probably not going to be president. But we use this structure a lot. If I were some kind of occupation, I would do this, right? If I were the prime minister, I would change the education system. If I were the foreign minister of Canada, I would ban trading with some bad country. Oh, that sounds bad. There's no bad countries, just bad people. And yeah, so something like that. So that's a good one. Let's take a look at our next one, guys. We got, they would stay longer if they had more time. Okay, this is good because, again, we're switching it around. We're starting with our conditional clause first, and then our if clause following that, right? So they would stay longer if they had more time. Now, also, something I should have noted beforehand. When we're using if clauses or conditionals, we always got our if clause, and then I really should have put a comma in here. If something happens, comma, then something else will happen, right? But if we switch it around with the conditional clause first and the if clause afterwards, we don't always need the comma, right? That can be removed, just like this example shows. Because we could switch this around, like we could invert this as well. We could say, if they had more time, they would stay longer. They would stay longer if they had more time. Either way, it has the same meaning. Anyhow, but moving on, if I won, what? This looks very similar. If I won $1 million, I could stop working. Yes, I think that's almost everybody's dream, right? But in Canada, $1 million, not really, depending on where you live in Canada, $1 million is usually not enough money to really stop working. Well, if you're in the countryside, yeah, but if you're in a major urban center like Vancouver or Toronto, yeah, housing's very expensive. So winning $1 million is not really enough to buy a house in either city. Maybe if you're in Montreal. Montreal is actually Canada's second largest city. Vancouver is the third largest. But Montreal is relatively cheap, but they also kind of have a bad economy, so good things and bad things kind of mixed together. But anyhow, last one here, guys. If I had more free time, I could travel around the world. Great, that sounds like fun. If I had more free time, I could travel around the world too, but I've got 2 kids, so no more free time for me. Whoop, just kidding. Okay, guys, so that's the second conditional. Like I said before, all of these conditionals here are imaginary situations, but just remember when you're saying if I were you, if I were him, her, them, etc., the president, and then this thing, of course, it could just be an imaginary situation, but a lot of times we use this to give advice to people, and it's a very useful structure, right? But let's move on to the third conditional on the back side of the sheet here. Now, like what I was saying before, zero conditional, not very commonly used because it's just talking about facts or things that are generally true. First conditional, talking about something being possible in the present or in the future. So very, very commonly used. Second conditional, talking about imaginary situations, right? And maybe used to give advice. Quite commonly used, but not as commonly used as the first conditional. Moving on to our third conditional, Not as commonly used as the second conditional, and definitely not as commonly used compared to the first conditional. But yeah, somewhere it's kind of similar to the zero conditional in that it's not so commonly used. This could be useful for you, but it's not used so much. But let's talk about the third conditional. This is maybe the hardest conditional to form structure-wise, because our structure here is if plus past perfect, comma, perfect conditional. Wow, that sounds great. Perfect conditional. Wow, that's a perfect conditional. Congratulations, right? Now, perfect conditional here in parentheses or in brackets here, it says would or wouldn't plus have plus past participle. Ugh. Now, that looks pretty tough, but let's wait until we look at the examples. You'll get a better idea when we do. The only time you use the third conditional is to talk about imaginary situations in the past, right? And that is one of the reasons why it's not as commonly used as the second conditional, because when you're using the third conditional, you're just talking about something that could have happened in the past and would have changed the past, right? So our examples here are if I had got. So you need had, right? If I had got, because you need the past perfect tense, right, of the verb. If I had got a gold medal, I would have been happy. Okay, all right. So if I had got a gold medal, I would have been happy. So of course, this person is talking about getting a gold medal, but not right now. They're talking about sometime in the past, and they would have been happy in the past, right? Second example, if I had met Susan last week, I would have given her the book, right? So this person didn't meet Susan last week, so they didn't give her the book. But the person is saying, well, if I had met Susan last week, I would have given her the book, right? So again, because this didn't happen, this is an imaginary situation, and this happened in the past. Okay, if the weather had been good, we would have gone water skiing. Okay, so maybe they're talking about last weekend. And well, last weekend here was actually really nice. Just yesterday, it was extremely sunny. But let's imagine that maybe the weather was really poor. It was raining, it was overcast, it was really awful, right? So anyhow, and maybe I had wanted to go water skiing, but I couldn't because it was raining. So right now I could say, if the weather had been good, we would have gone water skiing. But the weather wasn't good, so we didn't go, right? And last one here, if you had got, or if you had gotten, and it says gotten dash US. Yeah, I think Americans and Canadians would use gotten here. If you had gotten up earlier, you would have caught the train earlier. Okay, all these examples here for the third conditional are incredibly boring. So actually, I want to give you guys some additional ones, because these ones are kind of bleh, right? Anyhow, guys, I'm just going to erase this stuff here. Oh, this eraser is quite nice. Because last week I was really struggling to make the whiteboard clean. But anyhow, so third conditional, like these examples are good. They're just a little bit boring. Let me try to think of some examples that people commonly say when they're using the third conditional. Okay, now I should note here, we know the third conditional is used to talk about imaginary situations in the past. I would also add here that it is often used to talk about regrets. Okay, now I hope you guys know what regrets are. We all regret something. Now, regret is a noun and also a verb, right? I regret doing something. A regret is something that we feel bad about, right? Maybe something we did in the past, it was a bad idea, then later we feel like, I shouldn't have done that or whatever. That is a regret. And the third conditional is often used to talk about regrets. So let's say, for example, Okay, well, as you guys know, there is a good example. As you guys know, in Canada, well, actually, maybe you don't know this, but of course we have to study a foreign language, right? We speak English. Well, most of us speak English. Inside Quebec, actually, most people speak French as their first language. But in English-speaking Canada, of course, most of us speak English as our native language. And when we go to school and we have to study a language, most people have to study what language? Does anybody know? Do we study Spanish? No, that's in America, right? We study French, right? We study the French language because Canada has two official languages, English and French, of course, right? But when I was in school, when I was younger, in my hometown, there are very, very, very few French-speaking people in my hometown. I'd say like less than 1%. And if I think about the province of British Columbia, there are not many French speakers at all, right? In Canada, most French speakers are just in Quebec, and then there are some in New Brunswick, but there are not many west of Quebec. So French is not very useful for people in my hometown or people in British Columbia or Alberta or Saskatchewan or whatever, right? So unfortunately, a lot of kids in high school or in junior high, we feel like French is not a very useful language, so why do I have to learn this language? So that is actually one of my regrets because I didn't think French was useful. I didn't study French very hard, and now I can't speak French. I can speak very, very basic French. You know, je m'appelle Allan, je suis ESL instructor. Actually, that's probably wrong. But I can speak very, 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 very simple French at a very, very low level. But I kind of regret that I didn't study French harder because if I had, then I would speak French, and it's always useful to know another language. So let's make a third conditional sentence about my regret. What we would say here is, if I had done what? If I had studied French harder, I would have been able to speak French. Now, this is a decent sentence. It makes sense, and it's expressing my regret about not studying French harder, because if I had studied French harder, I would have been able to speak French. But I didn't, so I can't, right? Now, another kind of strange thing you will notice here, the structure is correct. If I had, and then we got our past perfect studied, French harder, I would have been able to speak French. That's fine. But another thing with conditionals is that you can mix them, right? I would have been able to speak French in the past, and I would have been able to speak French. We could change the second clause here, the conditional clause. We could just say, I would, and instead of have been, we could replace this with just, I would be able to speak French. And actually, that kind of makes more sense, right? But both of them make sense. But I would be able to speak French. Okay, good. All right, or let's think of maybe another regret. Think about something you regret from your past, right? Now, I'm not very good at math, and I never have been. I wish I was good at math, right? Or I wish I was good at biology or chemistry, something like that. Let's see here. Maybe I regret not studying finance in university, because maybe if I had studied finance, I would have made a lot of money. I don't know. So if I had studied, actually, let's not use study again. Let's use major. if I had majored in finance, I would have gotten a higher paying job, right? Of course, I'm an ESL instructor, and the amount of money I make is decent. It's not bad. But if I had studied or majored in finance, I would have gotten a higher paying job. Jobs in finance, of course, often pay a lot more money than jobs in many other fields, right? So maybe that's one of my regrets, right? But this is just one way to use the third conditional. You can use it to talk about regrets or kind of any imaginary situation that occurred in the past. Okay, guys, now we're almost running into our break. We've gone over the zero conditional, the first, the second, and the third conditional. So we've got those out of the way. Now, because we had a technical issue with the sound, we kind of went a little bit slower. I think what we should do after the break is maybe take a quick look at our mixed conditionals sheet, because this is very useful. I kind of talked about that here, but maybe we'll go into a little bit more detail with this after the class. And there's always a lot of good other material you guys can take a look at to study. So maybe we'll go over this, and then we'll get more into some vocabulary after that, and then we'll see where that takes us. So yeah, let's take a 10-minute break, and then after that, we'll get back into it, and we'll see what happens. Probably be something exciting. I don't know if something exciting will happen, but we'll keep our minds open, because it's always possible. And hopefully we won't have any more technical issues. Actually, before I take a break, I'm just going to start erasing this here. But yes, I hope you guys all had a wonderful weekend, wherever you are, whether it's Vancouver or in Chile, Brazil, Japan, or Mexico. The weather here right now is pretty nice, so I hope the weather in your guys' country is also pretty nice. Hopefully not too hot though. I don't like hot weather because I grew up north, so I prefer rainy weather. I know, that makes me sound like I'm crazy, but that's what I grew up with. Okay guys, whiteboard's looking not too shabby, not too bad. Pretty sure my coworker is gonna come here and we will take a break. And I will see you guys again in 10 minutes, and we'll look at mixed conditionals. Like mixed berries and nuts. It's delicious and useful and good for protein. That doesn't make any sense. Okay, but anyhow, bye-bye. Anybody watching? able to speak French, right? If I had studied French harder, I would be able to speak French, right? So that was the third conditional, but with a second conditional clause, right? Now, our structure here is pretty simple. Again, it's a mix of the third and the second. So first part here is if plus past participle, then our present conditional. So that's would or wouldn't plus verb in the base form or bare form. Now, the usage here is a present result of a past condition. So our examples are pretty simple. If I had listened to your advice, I wouldn't be in this mess. Now, actually, that's a really good example because that's a pretty common, maybe not a pretty common, but it's a fairly common sentence, right? Because if I had listened to this person's advice, then I wouldn't be in this mess. And this mess means some kind of problem, right? So a lot of times, like maybe your dad, your mom, your brother, your sister, your good friend, in the past they gave you advice, but you didn't listen to them. And now you're in big trouble. You have some kind of big problem and you think, oh man, if I had listened to my dad's advice, I wouldn't have this problem right now, right? Or I wouldn't be in this mess. And that's why this sentence here is quite good. If I listened to your advice, I wouldn't be in this mess. Yikes. Or our second example here, if I had checked the map, or sorry, not if I, if he had checked the map, he wouldn't be lost. Now, I think it was a good choice to use he here because it's often us guys that don't really look at maps because we think we can figure it out ourselves without a map, right? And then sometimes we end up getting lost or not knowing where we are. But anyhow, if he had checked the map, so third conditional if statement, he wouldn't be lost. He's lost right now, right? And that's why the second portion, our conditional clause, is in the second conditional form. Okay. And lastly, if I had gone to university, I would be a doctor now, right? So this person, maybe they didn't go to university, so they're not a doctor right now. So using the third conditional first, if I had gone to university, second conditional clause afterwards, I would be a doctor now. Okay, good. So yeah, you don't have to think when you're using conditionals that you can only use the zero conditional, the first conditional, the second conditional, or the third conditional. Of course you can, but you can also mix them up a little bit. So this is a good example, the third with the second conditional. So let's take a look at our next mixed conditional. We've got the second/third conditional, right? So in this case, we're going to be using an if plus past simple conditional first, and then after, we're going to move on to our perfect conditional. So a mix of the second and then the third, right? And with the third here, of course, you want would or wouldn't plus have plus past participle. So when do we use this? This is used when we're talking about a past result of a present or continuing condition. So this is not as commonly used because this is a little bit more complex. Let's look at our examples. If I were a good cook, so that is our if clause using the second conditional. I would have invited them to dinner. I would have invited them in the past, right? So what we're looking at here, of course, we got our second conditional first and then our third conditional afterwards. If I were a good cook, this is an imaginary situation because this person is not a good cook. They would have invited them, some person or a group of people, over for dinner, but in the past, right? Second example here. If you weren't such a poor dancer. That's kind of funny. Anyhow, so that's our second conditional. You would have got a job in the chorus line in that musical. If you weren't such a poor dancer, you would have got a job in the chorus line in that musical. Okay, so again, we've got our second conditional first, and then we have our third conditional afterwards, right? You would have got, or you would have gotten a job, right? That would have happened in the past, right? Now, thinking about my own situation, when I was younger, I really wanted to be a diplomat, right? Do you guys know what is a diplomat? It's a kind of occupation, right? And you have to be pretty highly educated to be a diplomat. But anyhow, a diplomat is someone who works for their country's government in another country, right? And they're supposed to, make the ties between these two countries stronger, or to help facilitate trade, or, something like that, right? In Canada, if you want to be a diplomat, you must speak both official languages fluently. You have to be fluent in English and in French. And of course, like I said earlier, I am not fluent in French. Actually, I'm very far from it. My French is quite poor. So what I could say here, using a mixed conditional of the second and third conditional, I could say, if I were fluent in French. If I were fluent in French. Now, so this part here, we have our if clause, and this is in the, the second conditional. If I were fluent in French, I would have, now, like most Americans and Canadians, this is different from British, because they'll say, I would have got. We can say that as well, but we usually say gotten. I would have gotten a, I would have gotten a job with the Canadian government. Or I would have become a diplomat. All right, guys, so either or here. If you notice here, of course, the first part here is our if clause, but it's in the second conditional, right? Our second part, our conditional clause, this is in the third conditional, because I would have done something. I would have gotten a job with the Canadian government, or I would have become a diplomat, right? These are jobs I could have gotten in the past if this were true in the present, right? Okay, guys, anyhow, but let's stop talking about conditionals so much. I think we need to move on and look at some expressions, look at some kind of idioms. But we've gone through the 0, first, second, third conditionals, and we've also taken a look at mixed conditionals. If you guys look further, there is some more information. We have a quick summary here with the 0, first, second, and third. This is just going over the general usage of the conditional and the structure and one example. So this is always really helpful. And in addition to that, there is another sheet here that goes over in a little bit more detail about the structure of conditionals. So if you're still a little bit lost and you don't totally understand, please take a look at the first, second, and third conditional, and also take a look at this part here. It says remember, and it's got some special rules, right? Very, very good stuff. But I think we need to move on and talk a little bit about some expressions and some idioms. So that's what I would like to do. I'm going to erase the board, and we're going to take a look at this sheet here. Unfortunately, there's no title. It just starts with, if it's not one thing, it's another. So let me erase this here. And we'll look at some idioms and expressions. Now, I just want to look at the ones that I personally use, because the ones that I don't use here, are probably not so commonly used in Canada and America, right? But let's take a look at the first one. If it's not one thing, it's another. Now, the example here is correct. It says if it's not one thing, period, or is that a comma? I hope that's a comma. It is another. I don't know why everything is capitalized here. It shouldn't all be capitalized. It should just be if it is not one thing, it is another. When we use this expression, we're usually using this when we're feeling really, really frustrated, really, really stressed out, maybe kind of angry. We're like, man, if it's not one thing, it's another. Right? When we say this, what we're trying to communicate is that there are too many things going wrong right now, one after another, right? You've got this one problem, then another problem pops up, and you're like, you know, you're frustrated, right? You're tired, you're stressed out. You're like, man, if it's not one thing, it's another. Beep, 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 right? You're probably very upset when you say this. Now, actually, I could have used this expression recently. For you guys, this is probably going to be a little bit funny. For me, well, now it's funny. At the time, not so funny. Let me try to think what happened. Okay. So I have two daughters. One is about 2 years and 3 months. 2 years and 4 months, about almost 4 months. And the other one is 3 weeks old. Oh my God, so young, right? Almost 3. 3 weeks old tomorrow. Anyhow, so when was that? Sometime last week, I think it was Wednesday or Tuesday. Of course, before I put my older daughter to bed, I've got to brush her teeth. And, you know, my wife is busy with our newborn daughter, so she doesn't have time for that, so I got to do it. Anyhow, so to brush my daughter, of course she starts brushing it herself, but she's not doing a very good job, right? So usually I have to kind of pick her up, put her in the baby position, and put her on my lap, and then I start brushing her teeth, right? Now I'm brushing her teeth, and then all of a sudden, my lap feels really warm in kind of a gross way, right? And I'm like, what's that? But, you know, whatever. Maybe just the temperature is getting really hot in here, I don't know. So continue brushing my daughter's teeth, hip hip hooray, we're done. And then I take her off, and she had actually peed, right? She had an accident. She peed right through her diaper, not diaper, I think panties, and her onesie, and it had gotten all over my pants, right? So my pants were covered in pee. And of course, this is pretty frustrating, right? So I'm like, oh man, this is bad. Then my wife asked me to take our newborn daughter and put her back in the bassinet. So I pick her up, and then I noticed that, you know, she is also peed or pooed. I need to change her diaper. So I pick her up, and then she pukes on me, and the puke goes down my arm, right? Okay, so here's another bad thing. My newborn daughter just puked on my arm. That's okay. Put her in the bassinet, clean up, and then I take off her diaper, and of course, just like in the movies, she pees on me, right? So I got peed on by my older daughter, then my newborn daughter puked on me, vomited, and then my newborn daughter also peed on me. So I got peed on twice and puked on, all in about a 20-minute time frame. So at the time, I was thinking, man, if it is not one thing, it's another. Like, it's not just my older daughter peeing on me, it's my younger daughter puking on me and peeing on me as well. Of course, now it's kind of funny. That's why I'm kind of laughing. But yeah, at the time, when you get peed on twice and puked on, it's not so funny. Anyhow, so that's how you can use it, though. Really fun expression. If it's not one thing, it's another, right? You got to say it with some anger. And yeah, that's how you use it, with anger, right? Okay, let's take a look at our next one. If not, if it does not happen or is not true. Yes, if not is fairly commonly used, but it's not just if not, has to be if not ... right? So when we use if not, we're just saying if something does not happen or if it's not true. Usually I will use this in mid-sentence. Like if, okay, so maybe I'm making a plan. Actually, I am making a plan with my sister right now for Canada Day, because Canada Day is actually on Wednesday. Yay, Canada Day. But of course, there are not many events because of the coronavirus, but that's okay. So I was saying to my sister, if the weather is nice on Wednesday, maybe you could take her or take my daughter to the beach, right? So again, that's a good conditional sentence. If not, then we'll stay at home. So I'm saying, if this is true, you go to the beach. If not, if the situation is not nice, if the weather is not nice, then we'll do this other option. So if not is really, really commonly used. Like, we could do this thing, but if not, we'll do this alternative thing, right? Let me think of another situation here. Also again, my friend is actually applying for a job at Amazon, right? As a programmer. Obviously, that would be a great job, probably high paying, blah, 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 whatever. So maybe I say to my friend, wow, if you get a job at Amazon, you will make a lot of money and get a lot of great experience. However, if not, you could still apply for other companies, right? So if not, very commonly used. But let's move on to the next one. If push comes to shove. Ooh, I like this one. If push comes to shove. If push comes to shove. Now, let's just think about this a little bit first. We got push, right? Now, we all know what push is. Push, right? Now, push is like a real physical thing, right? Push the person, push the desk, right? It could also be more abstract or mental or emotional. Somebody kind of pressures you mentally or emotionally. They are maybe pushing you. Hey, you got to get your work done. Come on, get your work done. You got to do it. You got to do it now because people are waiting to get their final assignments, right? But anyhow, if push comes to shove, what is shove? Shove has basically the same meaning as push. However, shove is to kind of violently push somebody. It's like a stronger term for push. So push, you can imagine that action, Shove, you kind of imagine this, right? So shove is much more violent. So if push comes to shove means like if push becomes shove, then what? So if push comes to shove says if we have to use force, if we have to do something with more power. So let's say we're talking about our good friend Brian, right? Our good friend Brian, his drinking is starting to concern me. I think he's drinking too often. So maybe my friends and I, we discuss, let's have an intervention with Brian. Let's sit Brian down and gently talk about why we think he is an alcoholic and why he needs to change his lifestyle. But, maybe that's not going to work. So I say, if push comes to shove, we'll have to do something more intense. So when we're saying if push comes to shove, what we're trying to say here is if that doesn't work, if our original action is not strong enough, not effective enough, then we'll have to take this stronger action, right? Push comes to shove, we'll have to do something more intense because our original plan didn't work, right? I'm trying to think of another example here. Okay, now I'm a smoker. Smoking is bad, blah, blah, blah. You shouldn't smoke. It's terrible, right? And especially now I got 2 kids. Of course I shouldn't be smoking. It's awful, right? Of course I don't smoke around my kids. I'm not Hitler, right? I'm not a terrible person. I do it outside and then I clean up. But anyhow, I really want to quit smoking. Of course, right? So my plan right now is, I should be honest. I don't really have a plan. But the basic plan in my mind right now is to reduce the amount of cigarettes I smoke in a day and then hopefully replace that with nicotine patches at first, and then hopefully just stop those as well and not be a smoker anymore. Hooray, right? So I think, okay, so that's a pretty good plan. However, if it doesn't work, I'm going to need to do something more intense, right? So maybe I say here, if push comes to shove, I will, what's a more intense plan? I will use the nicotine gum. Yeah, that's not really intense though, right? But anyhow, I will take some stronger action. I will use the nicotine gum. So just remember, if push comes to shove, means like if the original plan doesn't work, we have to do something more intense. We have to do something more difficult maybe. Okay, now after that we've got if so. If so is very commonly used. I'm pretty sure you guys know how to use that. If so, if that happens or something is true. If so, ... right? So let's say my friend says, you know, the stock market is going to crash, the economy is going downhill, 3 or 4 months from now, we will all be super poor, right? So I say to my friend, well, if so, then maybe you should take out all of your money out of your stocks, right? Like if that is true, then you should take this action. So whenever you use if so, you're just saying, if that's true, then we should do this, right? Or let's say, I was watching a podcast with Elon Musk, the founder and creator of Tesla Motors and the Boring Company, and wait, he has a bunch of other ones. The battery company. And anyhow, he has some other company, SpaceX, and he has another company, I think it's called Neuralink. And in this podcast, he was talking about how he's developed this, I think it's like 1 centimeter like tool that they want to put into somebody's head, and then it will spread wires throughout the brain, and it will send electrical signals to different parts of the brain. And people think, oh my God, like that sounds so scary, it sounds so terrible. But actually, the original usage of this is that he wants to use this to help people who are quadriplegics or people who have mobility issues because the nerves or the connection from their body parts to their brain has been damaged, so they can't use their hands or arms or legs, whatever it is. But he thinks using this Neuralink, he can help people, you know, move those body parts again because the link will help repair the brain. So I thought, wow, that's really cool. And if that's true, then there are so many other applications for it. So I was talking to my wife about it, and I said, if so, we should make sure that our daughters also get a Neuralink in the future. My wife said, oh my God, no, that sounds terrible. But I don't want my kids to fall behind. So if there's something we can implant in our brain, I'll also get it done. That should be good. Anyhow, if so, very, very commonly used. Let's move on to the next one, guys. Next one is, if the shoe fits, wear it. If the shoe fits, wear it. What could that mean, right? Now, if you think about this in a very simplistic way, if the shoe fits, like if the shoe, you know, your shoes, if they fit, wear it. Of course, if you're looking for shoes and you find a nice pair of shoes and it fits, you should wear it. Duh, right? So that could be one way to use it. But the real meaning of this is, if what people are saying is true, let's agree that it is true. It is a fair and good description. It is that way, and it cannot be denied. So what we're saying here is, if the shoe fits, wear it. We say this after somebody's maybe made a statement or, you know, made a point about something. And the point that they have made, the statement they have made, it's probably true. We would agree that it's true. It's fair, it's a good description. It cannot be denied, right? We can't say that's false. So we could say after that, well, if the shoe fits, you know, wear it. Like, that statement is true. Can't deny it. and that's all it means. Okay, so let's move on, guys. If worst comes to worst. Ooh, I like this one. If worst comes to worst. Okay, this is used usually in a very negative way, because if worst comes to worst means if things turn out badly, here's what we can do. So usually when you're making a plan with someone, you always think of like, what are the good possibilities, what are the neutral possibilities, what are the bad possibilities. And this is what you use when you're talking about a bad outcome, a bad possibility, right? If worst comes to worst, dot, 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 something, something, right? Now, usually we'll say if worst comes to worst, we should do this, whatever this is, right? So again, when you're talking about this one, you're talking about something bad occurring. And then after that, you're probably talking about what we should do if this does occur. If worst comes to worst, if the worst possible situation occurs, we should do this thing so that we don't die, right? Or something like that, right? So, when was it? Maybe in April. I don't know why, but maybe my wife and I had watched like some kind of criminal drama, and there was some violence in it, of course. It was kind of scary. And I think it was about somebody breaking into another person's apartment and assaulting them and hurting them. So my wife and I were talking about it. You know, what would happen if somebody breaks into our apartment? And I said to my wife, if worst comes to worst, if somebody actually breaks into our apartment. And then I said, you should hide with the girls in the bedroom and call 911. And then I will go to the kitchen and grab a knife because I don't have a gun at home. Of course, well, yeah, that's crazy. No, but almost nobody in Canada has a gun at home. But anyhow, yeah, we were thinking about the worst possible scenario, the worst possible situation. If worst comes to worst, blah, 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 right? Or, you know, maybe a lot of couples right now, because of the coronavirus and all this kind of bad stuff, maybe a lot of people are going through unemployment. They don't have a job right now. So I know my one friend said, you know, oh, he lost his job and he's waiting for his workplace to reopen. And maybe it will, right? But maybe it won't. I don't know. He said, if worst comes to worst, I will have to work at McDonald's, right? If the situation gets really, really bad, he thinks he can work at McDonald's. And that's really sad because he's a pretty smart guy. Yeah, but anyhow. So again, guys, if worst comes to worst, it's used to talk about what you might do in a really terrible situation. Okay, but let's move on to the next one. The next one's kind of a funny one. If you can't beat them, join them. Basically, this just means what it says. Since we cannot defeat them, let's work together with them, right? If you can't beat them, join them. If you can't beat these guys are too good, then instead of trying to beat them, you should join them. You should work together with them, right? Maybe in your workplace, maybe you work in sales, right? And that other guy in your department, he's just way better than you, right? He's a great salesman. You are an adequate, you are a decent salesman, but you'll never be as good as he is, right? So stop trying to beat him. Stop trying to be number one when you can't beat this guy. He's too good. He's too slick. He's too good looking, right? You can't beat him. So instead of beating him, try to join him. Be his friend. Learn from him, right? So yeah, if you can't beat them, join them. Kind of an interesting expression. Not very commonly used though, but kind of an interesting one. Okay, next one here is, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen, right? If you can't stand, if you cannot tolerate the heat of the kitchen, then get out of the kitchen. Now, this could mean, like, literally, you're in a kitchen and your friend, he can't stand it, right? You're like, hey, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. Like, get out of here. It's too hot for you, right? Get out. But we more often use this idiom to say, if you want to be responsible, then you must face difficulties, right? Or this could mean if the situation is too hard for you, you need to stop because apparently you are not strong enough to deal with this situation, right? But yeah, if you want to be responsible, you're going to have to face difficulties in life, right? And I think actually my mother-in-law, maybe she said this to my wife. No, that's not a good example. Let's say, me and my coworker, usually in a school in summertime, it's incredibly busy, right? We got a lot of students, we're really super busy. It gets very chaotic, it gets very messy, right? It gets really hard to organize all the classes, and you often end up working overtime. And, maybe my one coworker says, like, man, this is too crazy. I can't deal with this. I'm so stressed out. So I say to my coworker, hey man, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. So this could mean one of two things. This could mean me saying to my coworker, like, if this is too hard for you, then you need to get out of the kitchen. You need to quit your job. This is not good for you, right? And I understand. But I could also indirectly be saying to him, like, hey man, if you want this job, there's a lot of responsibilities. I know this is not fun, but you're gonna have difficulties. You got to buck up. You got to be stronger, right? So it also includes that kind of meaning. So if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. And last one is what if. Oh, what if? This is too simple, right? When you use what if, you're just saying consider this possibility. So when you are maybe making suggestions to somebody, let's say about possible plans in the future, you say, hey, what if we go to the beach this weekend, right? So you're just saying, hey, consider this. Or what if I get a job with NASA, right? And then my friend says, like, are you kidding? Your IQ is too low. And I'm like, yeah. Or, hey, what if the economy of the United States collapses? What if, right? So whenever we say what if, it's like, hey, consider this possibility. This is very, 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 very commonly used, maybe to talk about possible plans in the future or things that just might happen in the future anyhow. What if aliens came to Earth and gave us more technology? What if, right? So anyhow, all right guys, so let's move on and take a look at this other sheet full of expressions. I'm not going to go over everything here because not everything is useful, but a lot of these are. So let's get started with this one. We will probably continue with this one after the break because this one is also quite extensive. But anyhow, the first one here is anyone's call. But what this should say actually is it is anyone's call. It's anyone's call. When you say it is anyone's call, you're saying this is a situation in which any result, outcome, or consequence may happen, right? So this is a situation where we're not sure what is going to happen. So, like Vancouver is going to play LA on, Saturday. On one hand, the team in Vancouver right now, they're pretty strong. On the other hand, LA has also been playing really well. So, it's anyone's call. So what I'm saying here is both teams are really good. I'm not sure what the result, what the outcome or consequence may be. I've got no idea. It's anyone's call, right? Another way we could use this, though, is let's say I'm talking with 3 colleagues, right? And we're trying to come to, maybe it's lunchtime, right? This is a pretty simple situation. And we're all debating about what we should eat for lunch, right? We're going to order some food, but I don't know from where. So I say to everybody, I say, hey man, it's anyone's call. Whoever wants to make the decision about where we should eat, you make the decision. I don't care. It's not up to me. It's not up to you. But anybody who wants to take this on, take it on. It's anyone's call. But this is more likely used to talk about a situation in which we don't know what is going to happen in the future. We don't know what the consequence of this is going to be, right? So, pretty good one, actually. Number 2, as luck would have it. Oh, this is also a good one. Okay, as luck would have it is an expression used to describe something useful that has happened by chance. As luck would have it means you had some good luck recently, right? Or somebody did. And yeah, it was great. So let's say I went to the coffee shop and I forgot my debit card at home, right? Go to the coffee shop and I order a coffee at Starbucks and they say, okay, that's $2.50. And I'm like, all right, sure. And then I look and I'm like, oh, I don't have $2.50, right? So I'm sad. And I leave Starbucks because I can't get my coffee, right? But then when I walk outside, I see $2.50 on the ground. So I can say, as luck would have it, I found $2.50 on the street, right? But I didn't pick it up because it's coronavirus time and I don't want to touch things that I don't know where they came from. Haha, just kidding. I would still take the $2.50. Just kidding. Anyhow, this expression is not bad. Honestly, I don't use it too much. It just means that you were lucky and something good happened. I don't use it when I am very lucky, but just with small things. Fat chance. Fat chance, very easy to use. Fat chance is just used by itself. Say fat chance, right? Now, this expression is used to describe something that one believes has little or no chance of happening, right? So your friend says, you know, let's say you're with your guy friend, right? You're hanging out with your friend Bob, right? You and your friend Bob go to a club because, you know, Bob's a single guy. You're in a relationship. You're not going to do anything at the club, but, you know, you're going to join Bob, have a beer or two. But Bob is looking for a partner, right? And Bob decides to look for a partner in a club, which is probably a really bad idea. Maybe Bob should go to a library. That's weird too, right? Bob should, I don't know. Anyhow, you should try to find a girl in a more regular way, not at a club. But anyhow, you go to the club. Bob sees this very good-looking woman. She's gorgeous, right? And Bob, you know, Bob's your friend, but he's not that good-looking. Let's say Bob is balding. Bald Bob, right? Bob's balding, he's overweight, and he has a mustard stain on his shirt. That sounds really bad. Poor Bob. But Bob says, you know, like, oh man, I'm gonna go get that girl's number, and then, yeah, we're gonna date, and like, yeah, I'm gonna have a great time with this girl. And you're thinking like, okay, no, Bob, like, you're overweight, you're bald, you got a mustard stain on your shirt, your chances of dating this woman and getting her number are almost zero. So you just have to say to Bob, though, fat chance. Like, that's not possible. It's not gonna happen, man. So that's when you use fat chance. You're just saying there's like little or no chance of this happening, right? Or yeah, your friend is like, oh man, I'm gonna go to Las Vegas because I'm so good at playing poker. I'm gonna enter the World Series of Poker. I'm gonna win like, you know, $10 million, and then I'm gonna buy a house and like a Ferrari, blah, 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 right? And again, you just say to your friend, fat chance. Like, there is no way that's gonna happen. You're not gonna win the World Series of Poker, dude. You're not that good. Now, there are many other expressions we use that also kind of convey the same message that, you know, you don't have a good chance, it's probably not gonna happen. One of my favorite ones is, and this is a lot harder because it has to be used in a full sentence, is something will happen when pigs fly. I use this expression much more than I use fat chance. So something will happen when pigs fly. Now, pigs don't fly. Obviously, we know that, right? When pigs fly, pigs will probably never ever fly. So when you say this, something will happen when pigs fly, you're saying this will probably never happen because pigs will never fly. The chance of this occurring is almost zero, right? So I could say to Bob, Bob, you will probably, Bob says, I will get that girl's number. So I say, Bob, that will happen when pigs fly. Like, or, you know, Bob will date her when pigs fly. That will not happen. Or, I will win the lottery when pigs fly. Again, this probably will not happen. Anyhow, guys, but good one. Fat chance, much easier to use because you just say fat chance. Anyhow, moving on, guys. The luck of the draw. I'm sorry, guys. We're going to skip number 4. I can't recommend this. I rarely, if ever, use this myself. So more by accident than by design. Again, I'm sorry. I don't use this enough. I cannot recommend it. But number 6, Murphy's Law. This one I do use. And usually when I use this expression, Murphy's Law, I say, that is Murphy's Law. So what is Murphy's Law? Let's talk about that. 1 second. Erase this in here. Yeah, usually when I use this, I just say, ooh, Murphy's Law, or that's Murphy's Law. But Murphy's Law means the imagined law of nature that anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Murphy's Law is usually used when, or the expression is used when somebody has had some really bad luck, when the absolute worst situation that could happens, right? We say, well, that's Murphy's Law. Like, let's say Bob's like, okay, I'm going to go talk to that gorgeous woman. And while he's walking over there, he slips on a banana, and he falls down, and he breaks his knee. I'd say, like, wow, like, that was, like, the worst possible situation that could have happened. That's Murphy's Law. Like, that's the worst possible thing that could happen, right? So whenever we say, that's Murphy's Law, or like, ooh, Murphy's Law, what we're really saying is just, that was the worst possible outcome. The worst thing you can think of happening that could go wrong, it did go wrong, right? Ooh, that sucks, right? And that's Murphy's Law. Okay, number 7. No such luck. I do use this, not very much, but when I say no such luck, yeah, it just means we use this when we want to say to somebody, yeah, used to convey disappointment that something won't or is unlikely to happen, right? No such luck. But yeah, we just use this separate. No such luck. To be honest, I don't use it too much, but just sometimes. It's not bad. But let's move on to number 8, potluck. Well, potluck has 2 different meanings. The one meaning they have here, I'm sorry, I don't use it like this. Potluck usually is all together and describes a meal in which people bring a dish and share a bunch of dishes together. That's how I use it. So let's move on to number 9, rotten luck. Okay, rotten luck, that's good. Do use this. What is rotten? What if something rots? It is rotten. Rotten has the same meaning as like spoiled, expired, gone bad, right? If you drink or you eat rotten food, food that has expired or spoiled or gone bad, you'll get sick, right? You're not going to feel good. So rotten luck means really, really bad luck, right? When something really bad has happened to somebody, you might say, wow, that's rotten luck, right? So yeah, I think I should add that. That's rotten luck. That's really, really bad luck, man. Like, you know, your friend was on his way to the hospital because he hurt his wrist. Maybe he sprained his wrist. So he's going to the hospital. And on his way to the hospital, he gets into a car accident. And then he breaks his leg. I'm saying, like, wow, that is rotten luck. That's really, really bad luck. Now here, the explanation says, an expression used to commiserate. And commiserate, pretty tough word, not very commonly used. But commiserate is kind of like to show sympathy, right? So if you say to someone, like, that's rotten luck, you're trying to say to them, like, wow, that's really bad luck, and I feel bad for you, right? That's just too bad. Okay, but move on. Number 10. Oh, that ship has sailed. I like this expression. If you say to somebody or to yourself, that ship has sailed, what you're saying is that opportunity has passed. You missed that opportunity. So maybe you're using a conditional here, and you're thinking, you know, like, oh, if I had studied French harder, I would have gotten a job with the government. But that ship has sailed. That opportunity is in the past. I achieve that anymore. No, that's not exactly true. I could still do that, but that's what we're saying here. That ship has sailed. I don't have that opportunity. Or maybe when I was in high school, I could have dated Becky, right? Wow, Becky. But I was too, I don't know, I just didn't talk to Becky. But anyhow, but yeah, I didn't try to date Becky, so I didn't date Becky. But I could have tried. But that ship has sailed, right? That opportunity is no longer there. Okay, so anyhow, that ship has sailed just means you cannot get that opportunity anymore. It's something in the past that existed, but no longer exists. Okay, number 11. Oh, this is also a good expression. To be sitting pretty. If you say, I am sitting pretty, or she is sitting pretty, he is sitting pretty. I am sitting pretty. I guess this could mean that you're sitting down and you look very pretty. Congratulations, good for you. But the meaning of this is you are in an advantageous circumstance. Now that is a little bit of a hard explanation. But basically it means you're in a great situation, right? I don't know, you've achieved something great, or your job is really stable, you're making a lot of money, or just something is really good for you right now. You say, you are sitting pretty, you're in a comfortable, good situation, right? So basically, I think a better explanation is to be in a comfortable situation. Everything is working out for you. You are in a good situation. You are sitting pretty, right? So maybe right now a lot of people are not sitting pretty, but if you are in a good situation, congratulations, you are sitting pretty. Number 12 here says to get a free ride. Not a bad expression. Honestly, I don't use this very much, but to get a free ride means to benefit from a situation without putting in any effort, right? So I could think like maybe the sons and daughters of very rich people. Of course, they get a free ride through life. They don't have to worry so much because, their mom and dad have a lot of money and can help them out, right? But I just don't use this one enough. Not a bad expression. I don't use it, though, personally. Okay. And the next one, 13, guys. Totally skip this one. Never use it. So continue onwards here. Let's take a look at the backside. To have a vested interest. This one I do use. It's not an easy expression to use, but I do use this one. To have a vested interest in something or in somebody. So the way we would use this is, for example, I have a vested interest in something or in somebody. If you have a vested interest in something or in somebody, that means you have a personal reason for getting with something or somebody on an emotional level, right? So such as the opportunity for financial gain. Yes, not always about financial gain, but just you care about this thing or this person because if they do well or if it does well, this will benefit you. Usually financially, but not always financially. It could be, I don't know, emotionally or something. And the screen is green, but it is no longer green. Okay, good. So, of course, all of us have a vested interest in something, right? I could say we all have a vested interest in our own country, right? We want our country to do well, unless we're some kind of evil person, right? Like, ooh, stupid Canada, I hope Canada doesn't do well, bleh, right? But no. Of course, I have a vested interest in my own country, in Canada. I hope Canada does well. Or I have a vested interest in my community. I hope my community does well. Actually, I do have a vested interest in my hometown. So 2-3 years ago, when I heard there was going to be a major investment in my hometown, I was really happy for my hometown. Not because I was going to make a lot of money. Probably should have bought a house and then sold it. But anyhow, but yes, I was just happy because I have a vested interest in the well-being of my hometown. Anyhow, guys, but we should take a break. So we're going to take a break, come back in 10 minutes. We're going to continue onwards with this a little bit, and then we're going to talk about your writing assignment for this week. So anyhow, I will see you guys again in about 10 minutes. Au revoir. We're good? Okay. Hi everybody, welcome back. I'm going to continue onwards here with some of these expressions, and then we're going to talk about your writing assignment for this week, and maybe I'll go over a quick example. You actually have an example attached to it, but maybe I can give you guys a further example. So we'll see what happens though, time-wise, right? Anyhow, we just took a look at to have a vested interest in something or somebody. Let's move on to our next one, which is to have something drop or to have something fall into one's lap. So if you think about this physically, maybe you're sitting down, you've got your lap, right? And something falls or drops into your lap. It means that something good happened to you without you putting any effort into it, right? So yeah, that's our explanation. To have something desirable happen or to acquire something desirable without putting in any effort. So this basically means you had some really good luck and you didn't even do anything for it, right? Something dropped into your lap, right? You got really lucky and you put absolutely no effort into it. So congratulations, good for you. Now, thinking about it honestly, this situation just doesn't occur very often to somebody where they have some really good luck and they didn't even do anything for it. So that's why I actually don't use this expression very much, because the actual situation just doesn't happen very often. Is it a bad expression? No, but we're not really going to look at it in detail because it just doesn't happen often. So the next one, this one can happen fairly often, to jump on the bandwagon. So he or she or I, whoever, jumped on the bandwagon. I jumped on the bandwagon. If we say I jumped on the bandwagon, it means I joined some kind of growing movement just as it's becoming fashionable. So that could mean like you take part in a fad or trend, right? Let's say maybe recently, and this isn't true, but let's say the Vancouver Canucks, the local, hockey team, usually I'm not interested in them, right? Like they're an okay team, but usually they don't really do really well. They don't do poorly either. But, I just kind of ignore them. I'm too busy these days to be interested in hockey. Wow, that sounds really terrible. I think if Canadians were watching, they'd be really angry. But anyhow, but let's say this year, the Vancouver Canucks are doing really good, right? They have a really good chance of winning the Stanley Cup. And that basically means the playoffs, right? So maybe I jumped on the bandwagon, or I jump on the bandwagon, and I also become a Vancouver Canucks fan because they're doing really well right now, and I want to be part of that movement, right? I want to be part of that trend to be popular, right? Or let's say recently, well, actually, this is not recently, but when did this happen? I think this fad or this trend has stopped. But like 2 years ago, a lot of guys in Vancouver, or maybe in North America, maybe this is like an American-Canadian trend, they started putting their hair in a bun. And they called it a man bun, right? So guys with longer hair, they'd kind of tie up their hair into a bun at the top of their head. And they thought, wow, I look so cool, right? So now, I did not jump on that bandwagon, actually. I did not join that trend because I don't really like having long hair. I have long hair right now, but I need to desperately get a haircut because I don't really like having long hair, especially in the summer. It gets too hot. But anyhow, maybe I did grow out my hair and I put it in a man bun. So I could say I jumped on the bandwagon. I want to join that movement, right? I want to be popular too. So anyhow, that's the meaning of that one. Kind of a fun one. Not too useful, but not too bad. To luck out. To luck out, pretty simple expression. We just say to luck out. He lucked out, I lucked out, she lucked out. I lucked out. The meaning of this is very simple. It just means I was very lucky, right? Or to experience very good luck. To be very lucky. So let's say I go to a poker tournament, and I'm not a very good poker player, but during the poker tournament, I just get really lucky. I keep getting pairs of aces or kings, and I keep winning and winning and winning, and I win the tournament, and I win, $10,000 or whatever, right? But I feel like it's not because I'm a great player, and it's not because my skill level in poker is really high. It's just I got really lucky, right? So I could just say, man, I lucked out. I got really, really lucky, and that's all it means. So to luck out, pretty commonly used, right? Or you see your good friend Brian, and again, Brian, he's bald, he's overweight, and he's got a mustard stain on his shirt or his pants all the time. But you see Brian, and he's dating some new girl. So you're happy for Brian, of course, he's your friend, right? But he is dating some tall, good-looking woman, right? And you're like, wow, like they're really mismatched, right? Like she is too good for Brian. No, that's really mean. I really shouldn't say that. But anyhow, so you think like, wow, Brian lucked out. Like he's got a really good-looking girlfriend. And Brian has a mustard stain on his shirt, so I don't know how he got a good-looking girlfriend. Anyhow, so yeah, lucked out, pretty good one. Let's move on to 18, guys. To make hay while the sun shines. Sorry, I don't use this expression. This is kind of like an old countryside expression, and even though I'm from the countryside, I never use this, so let's skip that one. 19 though. This is pretty commonly used. To play the waiting game. Now, to play the waiting game, this just means, like if you say to someone, hey, we'll have to play the waiting game. This means we need to wait and see what happens, right? Because we're not sure how the situation will turn out. So yeah, it says to wait before doing something in order to do it at the most opportune moment or time. It means we shouldn't take action now. We need to wait until later, right? So you might say, let's play the waiting game, or we'll have to play the waiting game. Or maybe I will have to play the waiting game. So just remember, when you're using this, you're saying, I can't take action now. I'm going to have to wait and see and take action later when I think the timing is better, right? So for example, let's say right now, of course, we're dealing with the coronavirus. Now, my friend actually has a really great idea, or he believes he has a great idea, for a new restaurant, right? But now it is not a good time to open a restaurant, right? Restaurants and the hospitality industry are doing very poorly because of the coronavirus, of course, right? So maybe I say to my friend, well, you'll have to play the waiting game, right? You're gonna have to wait and see before you open this restaurant, because if you open now, you're not gonna do well, right? It's obviously not a good time to start a restaurant, right? And that's playing the waiting game. But anyhow, let's move on, guys, to push one's luck. This one actually is a good expression. And usually we say, don't push your luck. Don't. Actually, whoops, let's start with a capital. Don't push your luck. Don't push your luck. The meaning of this, when you say this to somebody, hey, don't push your luck, it means so far you have been lucky. Don't continue trying because your luck will run out. You will run out of luck and then you will fail. So don't push your luck. Stop now while you are ahead. While you're winning, you should stop. Now, this is commonly used when gambling, right? Or in any kind of situation that involves some kind of chance. So let's say, for example, let's say, for example, sorry, something just popped up. Really got me off track there. Let's say, for example, that you and your friend are in a casino. Why is there so much? Well, we're talking about luck, so yeah, gambling. Anyhow, you're in a casino, and your friend is playing blackjack, and he won 3 times in a row, and he keeps putting all of his money in, right? He starts with $5. He bets his $5 and he wins. So then he's got 10. So then he keeps his $10 in there and he wins again. Now he's got 20. But he keeps his 20 in there and he wins again, and now he's got 40. Now, your friend's gonna put in all $40 and you're like, whoa, 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 hey, 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 hey. Don't push your luck, right? You've been lucky so far, but it's not just gonna continue like that, right? So we might say, don't push your luck, quit while you are ahead. Quit while you're ahead. That means you should stop while you're ahead, while you've been lucky. Do not continue, because if you continue, eventually you're going to lose and you'll lose all your money, right? Anyhow, so that's what it means to push one's luck. It kind of means, yeah. Now here it says to take a risk in the hope that one will achieve success. Yeah, that's true, but usually it's used in a negative sense. Don't push your luck because it won't go on forever. Okay. 21 though, to strike gold. Ooh, this is a good one too. If I say, I, now past tense, struck gold. Now, the mental image you should have here is that maybe well, not maybe, but the mental image here is I'm a miner. I have a pickaxe, right? I am mining. I'm looking for gold or for silver, right? Well, in this case, gold. I'm looking for gold and ding, I struck gold. Yes, there's a lot of gold. I'm gonna be rich, right? To strike gold means basically to get very lucky or to be very lucky. So in that way, it's kind of similar to saying, you know, he or she or I lucked out, right? If you strike gold, you have achieved success. You have become very, very lucky, right? So maybe a lot of nice guys who are married, you know, they're really happy with their wife. They say, you know, when I met my wife, I struck gold. You know, I got so lucky meeting my wife. Bleh, right? Ugh, too romantic. Or, you know, your good friend John, he has his dream job, right? His dream job is working at the zoo with animals. John just really loves animals, right? So maybe John says, I struck gold when I got my job at the zoo, right? Because he's really happy taking care of animals. Okay, so that's all that means. And 22, to strike while the iron is hot. This is usually used when giving advice. We usually say, like, you should strike while the iron is hot. The meaning of this is you should take action while you have a good advantage. It says here to make the most of a particular circumstance and use it to one's advantage. The explanation here is a little bit too hard. I think a better explanation would be if there's a good opportunity now, you should take that opportunity. If it's the time to take action now and you will benefit from it, you should strike while the iron is hot. And actually, this expression has kind of an interesting history because it's related to being like, it's a very old expression. Comes from Old English. It's related to being a blacksmith. And a blacksmith was, you know, that guy in the medieval villages that made tools out of iron and steel, right? Maybe he made hammers or sickles or swords or knives or whatever. And you know, their job is pretty tough. They're always hitting things with hammers and trying to mold them into swords or whatever it is. But yeah, you have to strike it when the iron is hot. Ding, ding, ding. But the meaning of it, yeah, is you gotta take action now while you have a good opportunity. Because if you don't strike while the iron is hot, you will lose the opportunity, right? So maybe you think it's a good time to, probably this is not good advice, but maybe you think it's a good idea to invest in the stock market right now because it's not doing well. You should buy some stocks, right? Probably not. It's probably going to go back down again. But anyhow, maybe somebody would say, whoa, you should strike while the iron is hot. You should invest now because later the prices are going to go back up and you will have missed the opportunity. Anyhow, guys, next one is touch or knock on wood. Now it says on the wood. No, sorry, I just say knock on wood. And when we say this, knock on wood, we usually actually knock on wood. Now, I know you guys can't see the desk, but when somebody says this, they say knock on wood, right? Knock on wood. Now, the board obviously is not wood, but anyhow. The meaning here says, this is a superstitious expression. It's said to stop a confident statement from bringing bad luck. Okay, now usually when we use this, knock on wood, what we're saying is, I hope it works out. I hope something bad does not happen, right? So let's say my colleague and I are discussing the future of this course, or whatever course, and we say, I really hope it will be successful. And my colleague says, knock on wood. So what he's saying is kind of like, yes, I also hope it's successful. I hope nothing goes bad, right? So by knocking on the wood is kind of, how can I say, casting a protective spell over the course so that hopefully nothing bad happens, right? So your friend says, I'm going to join the poker tournament on, why do I keep talking about poker? Oh my God. Anyhow, I'm going to join the poker tournament next weekend, right? And I say, well, knock on wood. I hope you have good luck. I hope that protects you. I hope something bad does not happen, right? Okay, guys, but anyhow, next one, 24. To wait in the wings. I'm sorry, guys. I don't use this expression. I cannot recommend it. So we're going to skip on to the last one here. While the going is good or while the going is tough. And that just means when the conditions are good or when the conditions are bad. While the going is good or while the going is tough. Now, usually we use this when we're giving advice to somebody, whether it's positive or kind of negative advice to somebody. It depends on whether you're saying while the going is good, which is positive, or while the going is tough or bad, which is, of course, negative, right? Now, let's say things are not going well at my friend's job, and he's considering quitting, right? And so I say to him, you should quit while the going is tough. So I'm saying it to him like, things are tough at your job right now, you should probably just quit, right? Or some people might say, again, related to gambling, they're gambling and they're doing really well, right? They're doing extremely well. But the longer they continue, they're more likely to start losing money, right? So again, you say to your friend, hey, you should quit while the going is good, right? You're doing really good, things are going great, but you should quit now while you're ahead, right? Just like related to, where was it? Yeah, don't push your luck. Like, hey, you should quit while the going is good. Don't push your luck. Quit while you're ahead, right? Okay, guys, so anyhow, I think we've kind of gone over as much or as many of these expressions as we can related to chance. Like I said before, a lot of these ones are good, but the ones that I skipped, I cannot really recommend them. They might be maybe a little bit too British or just not commonly used enough, but the ones I did go over are really good. I think especially the shorter ones, like if you turn back to the first page, anyone's call, fat chance, Murphy's Law, no such luck, rotten luck, that ship has sailed. All these ones are quite commonly used. Really, really good stuff. I can recommend them. So what we need to do now, guys, is get off of the vocabulary finally and talk about this week's actual assignment, your writing assignment, right? So I'm just going to erase the board here, but please take a look at Global College Assignment, if poems, right? So you're probably thinking, oh dear, I have to write a poem and I don't like poetry. Ooh, do I feel bad for you? Well, that's just too bad. You're going to have to write some poetry. It's good for you. Okay, now, I'll have to be honest, I am not very good at writing poetry myself. I'm not a poetic person. That was never my forte or strong point. But it's good practice to write poetry, isn't it? And of course, the poetry you'll be writing this week will include a lot of if clauses, right, and conditionals, because that is our focus. So let's take a look here. It says, this week you are tasked with creating a poem about if situations. You will have to create scenarios that relate to each other based on the previous line. See the example below. Okay, guys, so I'm going to read over the example here. You guys try to pay attention. It says, if I eat a lot of cake, I will gain weight. If I gain weight, I will have to go to the gym. If I go to the gym, I will gain lots of muscles. If I gain lots of muscles, I will become a professional bodybuilder. Wow. If I become a professional bodybuilder, I will enter competitions. If I enter competitions, I will win them. If I win them, I will celebrate by eating cake. Ooh, okay. All right, guys, so this is a one stanza or one paragraph little poem here, right? And we've got so many if clauses. Now, what I really like about this one is at the beginning it says, if I eat a lot of cake, I will gain weight, which is true, right? But the first one kind of connects to the very, very end. So I like how the author of this poem kind of brought everything back to the end at the very last sentence. If I win them, I will celebrate by eating cake. So it's kind of a circular pattern, right? If I win them, I will celebrate by eating cake. If I eat a lot of cake, I will gain weight. If I gain weight, I will have to go to the gym. If I go to the gym, I'll gain a lot of muscles. If I gain a lot of muscles, become a professional bodybuilder. Become a professional bodybuilder, I will enter competitions. If I enter competitions, I will win them. If I win them, I will celebrate by eating cake. Yikes. Okay, so what you're supposed to do here, guys, is this poem is written using the first conditional, right? However, you will be learning about all of the conditionals, 0, first, second, third, and mixed conditionals, and may choose to write your poem in another type. For this assignment, you must write 4 to 5 paragraphs, or in the case of poetry, stanzas, all of which must use if conditionals. You must also try to incorporate up to 5 of the idioms and expressions related to chance that you have learned this week. The situations in your poem do not need to be realistic. You can be as creative as you like. And this assignment is due on Wednesday before class, so try your best and have fun. Okay, guys, so those are the conditions. You have to write 4 or 5 paragraphs. Now, the writing for this is very, very different than the writing for most of your assignments because this is poetry. So I think when we're marking this, we're going to be a lot easier going about how you approach this. Now, my recommendation is, I think, don't write 4 paragraphs. Don't write 5 paragraphs. Write 4 paragraphs. So please write 4 paragraphs. Now, I think an easy way to approach this would be each paragraph should include examples of one of the conditionals, right? So maybe your first paragraph, use the 0 conditional. Second paragraph, the first. Third, the second. And the fourth paragraph, use the third conditional, right? Use one conditional in each paragraph. So what I mean here is first paragraph. Now I'm saying paragraph, but actually I should say stanza, because stanza is kind of like the poetic term for paragraph. Right, about the 0 conditional. And then second, use the first conditional. And so on. And there you go. So that's just my idea. Now, what I think we should do is probably look at another example. The other example included here is just like one big, large stanza. So it's not really following this style here, but maybe it could give you guys some ideas. So let's look over this one here, and then maybe I will give you guys an idea about how you could start writing this, right? So let's take a look at our example. So please take a look at this one here, guys. It says if poems, or if poem at the top. And this one is all about recycling. Okay, so that's nice. And it says, if we recycle, we will reduce carbon emissions. If we reduce carbon emissions, the air will be cleaner. If the air is cleaner, there will be fewer health problems. If there are fewer health problems, people will live longer. If people live longer, they can experience more of the world. If they experience more of the world, they will want to protect it. If we join them and protect our planet, ecosystems may replenish. If ecosystems replenish, color might return to coral reefs. If color returns to coral reefs, fish and various sea life will return. If fish and sea life return, we will become more engaged with our oceans. If we're engaged with our oceans, we won't pollute them with waste. If we don't pollute our oceans, plastics won't be a common sight. If plastics, it says isn't. Well, if plastic isn't, okay, never mind. That's correct. But anyhow, if plastic isn't a common sight, turtles will have a place to lay eggs. If we want turtles to have a place to lay eggs, we must recycle. Wow, okay, all right. So yeah, that was all about recycling and protecting the planet. Very, very nice stuff, right? But what you guys can write about is totally up to you. You just have to make sure that you follow these structures, right? You're gonna have to use the zero conditional, the first conditional, the second conditional, and the third conditional, and try to break it into 4 stanzas or 4 paragraphs. Now, another important thing you'll notice here, looking at the example here on the ifs poems, but also looking at the example on the actual assignment sheet, you will notice that they don't use any periods, right? Except at maybe the very end of the stanza or very end of the paragraph. Instead, when they're making lines, they're just using commas. So like the first part here, if we recycle, so that's our if clause, we will reduce carbon emissions. There's our conditional clause, right? And of course, this is in the first condition. This is an example of the first conditional, right? But then at the very end, just another comma. If we reduce emissions, again, if clause, the air will be cleaner. And then again, this is an example of a conditional clause using the first conditional, comma. So it just continues using these commas till the very end of the stanza. So when you're writing these guys, this is unusual, but you just need to use a lot of commas until the very end of your stanza or paragraph, where you will use either a period, or maybe there's a question at the end, I'm not sure. Maybe you use a question mark, or maybe it's kind of funny, or you want to emphasize something. Maybe there's an exclamation mark, right? Okay, anyhow, guys, I want to give you a further example. So let me erase this off the board. I'm going to think about my first stanza using the zero conditional. Now, like I said before, I am not a poetic guy, so writing poetry, actually kind of tough for me. And I need an example to get started with because I am not good at writing poetry. What do I want to write about? I didn't really think about this. Maybe I'm going to write something boring. Okay. So I'm going to start with my first stanza. Okay, I'm going to start with my, of course, we're talking about the first stanza is going to be the zero conditional. If we cook, no, what do I want to say here? If we cook, it gets hot. If it gets hot, so again, like when you're connecting this, like you got your if clause and then your conditional clause, and your conditional clause can kind of become your if clause in the second line, and so on and so on. So I'll try to demonstrate that. If we cook, it gets hot. If it gets hot, we open the windows. If we open the windows, we can hear too many crazy people yelling outside. Okay, now actually I should kind of label these. Line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4. If we can hear too many crazy people yelling outside, we close the windows. If we close the windows, and cook, it gets hot. Okay, so this is just my example paragraph for the zero conditional. This is maybe what I used at the very beginning. And what I wanted to do, now I did create this pretty quick, but I did have to think about this a little bit. And this isn't too exciting. I know it's not like a really fun one. Maybe it's just realistic. But what I wanted to do was make sure that the last statement kind of connected to the first one, so that it kind of continues this circular pattern, right? But anyhow, if we cook, it gets hot. Of course, this is true, right? If it gets hot, we open the windows. If we open the windows, we can hear too many crazy people yelling outside. If we can hear too many crazy people yelling outside, we close the windows. If we close the windows and cook, it gets hot. And the cycle continues. Again, if we close the windows and we start cooking, it gets hot. So we open the windows, but then we can hear the crazy people yelling outside again. So, but that's kind of what I wanted to do, is I wanted to connect the very first sentence with the last one so that there's a circular pattern here. Now, you don't have to write 5 sentences, right? I kind of recommend at least you should try to write 4, and you should try to connect them as best you can. But just try your best, right? It doesn't have to be perfect. Poetry is kind of hard. Now, the other important thing, like I said before with stanzas, is there is no period except for at the very end. So remember, if we cook, it gets hot, comma. If it gets hot, comma, we open the windows, comma. If we open the windows, comma, we can hear too many crazy people yelling outside, comma. If we can hear too many crazy people yelling outside, comma. We close the windows, comma. If we close the windows and cook, comma, it gets hot. Okay. All right, so yeah, remember, because you are writing in stanzas, not paragraphs, you only actually have a period at the very end of your stanza. Okay, guys, so that's my zero conditional example. Let me try to make an example using the first conditional. So let me erase this here. Move on to our second stanza. And I'm going to say for your writing, now of course it would be nice if all 4 of your stanzas connected to each other, but I'm not actually concerned about that. I just think in each individual stanza that everything in that stanza should be connected to each other. But your next stanza, it doesn't have to be, right? they still hear me? You can still hear me, right? Just no mic. Okay, so anyhow, guys, sorry, I had to change the batteries. We only got 2 minutes. Anyhow, if I did continue further, we'd go into our fourth stanza using the third conditional, and I think that'd be good. Now, like what I said before, write 4 paragraphs, each paragraph using one of the conditionals. So first paragraph, 0. Second paragraph, first conditional. Third paragraph, second conditional. Fourth paragraph, the third conditional. But you don't have to follow my advice so rigidly. You could mix it up and in each stanza use different conditionals. That's fine. I'm just recommending a style that will make it a little bit easier for you. And when you're writing it, of course, try to use some of those expressions. Try your best, and we'll see how you do. So it's due on Wednesday before the start of class. Anyhow, guys, I hope you enjoyed class with me today. I know I kind of blah, 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 talked a lot, but I hope it was informative. And I think going over conditionals, and even if this is easy for you, reviewing conditionals is always a good idea, because conditionals, especially the second and third, and sometimes the zero conditional, can be kind of tough. Okay, guys, but good luck with your writing. I hope you guys have a little bit of fun. Try to have fun with it. Don't approach it like, this is going to be boring, this is going to suck. Maybe it will suck. I don't know, maybe you don't like poetry. That's okay, try your best. It's good practice. So anyhow, I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to let you guys go, and I will see you again on Friday. You will see Melanie on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. All right, guys, but have a good day, and take it easy. Goodbye.